Hey there, Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement and bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, where I take a concept, a strategy, a practice, something that we use to great success in our Autism Fitness Certification program and bring it to you so that you can make it workable for your autism and neurodivergent life skill athletes. And of course, before I get started, please definitely subscribe and share this video with someone for whom it might make a difference in their fitness or adapted PE programs, whether it's your very first day or even your first session, or you've been doing this for decades and decades. There are strategies here that will greatly enhance your programs to the benefit of those you serve. So in this Autism Fitness Tuesday training, I'm going to be talking about a question that I get a lot. What do we do with groups, or what are some of the best ways that we can work in group settings with the autism and neurodivergent population? And there are a couple different variables. I consider it almost like not so much ping pong, but more like pinball, really. So we have all these different variables that are bouncing around, and our job is to manage and optimize everything so that everybody gets a high score. All right, stay with me. The analogy mostly works. So with group programming, there are a couple of important considerations. Consideration number one is that we want to scale the program for every single individual who's participating. Lila has her squeaky toy, so I'm probably going to wind up editing this out. All right, Lila and her squeaky toy. So group programming, let's talk about some of the variables, right? So some of the challenges to group programming are that, number one, we have to make it scalable for everybody, because a big part of group programming for the autism and neurodivergent population is that we need to make it scalable. We want everybody to be able to participate to the best of their physical, adaptive, and cognitive ability. And if the program isn't scalable, that is probably not going to happen. This, by the way, is a good time to talk about sports programs. Sports, as my lead-in always is, sports are not bad, but we have to look at them from the perspective of, is this going to work for everybody in the group? Are they going to be able to participate in a half-hour or a 45-minute basketball or volleyball or soccer program? Is that individual actively participating, or do they kick the ball once and that's the extent of their participation? The reason why we utilize resistance-based training and general fitness protocols in autism fitness programming is because we can make it scalable to every single individual. For example, if we're doing a medicine ball push throw, we can have an athlete who's doing that push throw from 15, 20 feet away with a coach or another peer, and they are getting the absolute most out of that power exercise. We can also have an athlete who, at this point, is just ready to hand the ball back and forth to the instructor or to the coach, and that is perfectly fine. We're taking the exercise and dialing back as much as it needs to be, and then we're taking the exercise and making it as challenging as it needs to be. And if you have a scalable activity, then it is going to work for all the participants. So there are two different scenarios we typically run into with group programming. We have a group program where the individuals are pre-selected, so there has been a review of their current capabilities and their group readiness, and that works really well because we know who's in our group. We want to make it age range appropriate. So we don't want a 14-year-old working with a 24-year-old, the same way we don't want a 6-year-old working with an 18-year-old. So we want to make it age appropriate, and then we also want to make it group readiness appropriate as well. Do these individuals have similar adaptive or motivational profiles? Can we ensure that they are going to remain as independent as possible and able to follow the directions or they're already familiar with some of the directions as well. So we want kind of a pre-readiness screening. And then, of course, there are many cases, adapted PE falls into this, where we don't necessarily have selection over who's going to be in that group, but we can still make it workable, make it scalable for those who are participating. And the way that we do is break that down into the physical, the adaptive, and the cognitive. Physically, what exercises are we choosing, and then how are we structuring that session? Adaptively, how are we ensuring motivation and reinforcement for our participants? And then cognitively, and this is especially pertinent to groups, how are we providing our direction? How are we coaching? How are we cueing? Are we screaming from across the room, or are we giving a very clear, concise, directed instruction for that athlete or those athletes so that they have the best opportunity to understand the expectations for performance of that exercise and do it to their best of their current ability level. So we do want to get, either in that first couple of sessions or over time, a good idea of how each athlete performs that squat or that push throw or that farmer's walk, how motivated they are to participate. So are they going to do 2 or 3 or 4 repetitions and then stop, and then their hands come down and they're no longer doing the presses? Are they going to wander off? Do they need a secondary reinforcer? Do they need a token board? Do they need to be reminded of what's going on first, second, what they have after fitness or adapted PE? These are all small but really important variables that we might need to work in for some athletes, but not all. So that's where we want to make it individualized. And then from a cognitive perspective, are we using directed language for each exercise for each athlete also? So if you have 3 or 4 athletes doing 3 or 4 different exercises, and we're giving a general vocal direction or verbal direction of, hey, pick up the dumbbells, well, what if those 3 or 4 athletes all think that we're talking to them? So we want to be targeted and strategic with the language that we are using. By the way, speech therapists and speech pathologists absolutely love this, because we are using very concise and precise language. So there are language targets that we can build in as a secondary or even tertiary target or goal for each athlete. But let's get back to the specialization or the target here, which is exercise. And how do we have an exercise session for a group of athletes that actually has some type of beneficial outcome? And of course, in Autism Fitness, we always say that there is a significant difference between moving around a lot and a structured exercise program. A structured exercise program is going to have specific exercises done in a specific way so that there is a training effect, meaning that the exercises are building strength, stability, and motor planning that generalize to other areas of life, those activities of daily living. Just moving a lot around randomly is fine, but that is not going to accomplish those goals, whereas a structured fitness program built around resistance training will, right? Again, that has to be scalable for each individual, because now we get into the setup itself. So when we're setting up a group program, the 2 best strategies to use are going to be, most often, are going to be supersets and circuits. So a superset is exercise A, exercise B, going back and forth. So for example, overhead press and a standing band row or a standing cable row. Great superset. And then we have circuits, which are 3 or more exercises performed back to back to back to back to back, or in sequence. So we have a squat, and then an overhead press, and then a sandbell slam, and then a heavy carry. Why is this so important? Because number one, we want to ensure that every athlete has an opportunity to be doing something at any point in that session. Because it's easy to say that we have a 35-minute or 45-minute session, but is the athlete or are the athletes able to participate in the majority of that session, or is it more like 25 minutes of getting ready and getting set and instruction and then 14 minutes of actual moving? Of course, this is going to depend largely on the athlete's adaptive or motivational and focused engagement. However, we also have to look at, from a physical perspective, is the athlete given an opportunity at any point to be participating in a particular exercise. So what we're avoiding by setting up a circuit station is waiting. So when we have athletes standing around waiting for their turn, that creates a bottleneck. And the bottleneck is an invitation for many of our athletes to get dysregulated or to get off task. Nobody likes to wait, and we can create an environment and a situation in which nobody really has to. Now that's different, of course, from having an athlete who needs more frequent breaks. So we might have an athlete who has a 1-to-1 ratio of exercise to a break afterwards, and instead of transitioning to the next exercise, like going from that squat to that overhead press, that athlete needs a break. Now, they may not need a break from a physiological standpoint, meaning that athlete may not be physically fatigued, but they need that self-regulatory break because the exercise can be overwhelming for them and it's a real challenge. So now they need 30 or 45 seconds to cool off and chill out. So when we have a circuit, it means that the other athletes can participate, those other individuals can participate while that one athlete takes a break, and it does not further complicate the session. Of course, you as the instructor, if you're a solo instructor, and even if you have other staff working with you, it can be difficult to figure out who needs what at any given time. You know, your head is on a swivel and you're trying to figure out, okay, is this athlete on the progression that they need to be with the squat? Is this athlete sufficiently focused and completing this exercise? There's a lot to take into account. So what we want to do is take out the guesswork and ensure that each athlete is accounted for from a physical perspective. Do they have that exercise scaled to their current level of ability, whether it's progressed or at standard or modified? Are they sufficiently engaged and motivated to participate right now? If they are, awesome. If not, what do we need to build in as far as a reinforcer? And of course, from a cognitive perspective, do they understand the expectation for the exercise? Do they understand where to go next? These are all things that are often helped or aided by having a visual schedule and giving our athletes reminders of, okay, you've got overhead presses and then you're going over to sandbell slams after that. The other thing about setting up circuits is if you have an athlete who you are particularly focused on with a specific exercise, you can be at that station to help modify it for them at any given time, so that over the course of several sessions, weeks and months, even a year, that athlete is developing that skill. So again, that skill actually is generalizing to ADLs as opposed to randomly having them use a different weight or do a different movement or do it a different way every single time, because then that skill is not going to develop. We need to have continuity in each exercise for the athlete so that we are steadily increasing their performance level. That is going to lead to those greater gains in strength, stability, and motor planning, of course. So when we are setting up as a circuit station, we want to make sure that each exercise is appropriate for each athlete. So it's either progressed or modified to their current level of ability. We want to make sure that the athletes are being reinforced. So using our behavior-specific praise, using access to preferred activities, and of course using choice as well. So we may start off a session asking each athlete which station they want to start out and then moving on from there. If that's not always the case, that's all right, but we may have an athlete start the session and this week one athlete gets to pick where they're going first, the next week another athlete gets to pick where they're going first, to give them a sense of autonomy and control even in that group setting. Again, this is about scaling the session so that everybody is getting what they need out of it, because there is a big difference between getting through a session and thriving in a session and actually meeting goals. It is extra important in a group setting that there is consistency, because with more participants, there is going to be a little more lag time or latency between the athlete doing their first set of squats or their first set of carries and their third or fourth set. So one of the things that we often advocate for a program in our Autism Fitness curriculum is using fewer exercises, especially to start with when we're working with groups. So it may seem that variety is going to be the answer to have the greatest program, but usually that works as a detriment. It works contrary to our goals. Because if our goals are skill development, if our goals are increasing strength and motor planning so that they show up in the outside world, then having more variety is actually going to counter what we're trying to achieve. Because if that athlete is not coming into contact and not practicing those movement patterns regularly enough or consistently enough, then they're not going to develop the skill. So even if the idea of, oh, let's change it out every 2 weeks or every 6 or 8 weeks, we're going to change to a different activity, has that really given each individual enough time that they acquire the skill, that it's demonstrable, that we can say, yeah, they have this press or they have this push-up or they have this band row independently? Well, that's usually not the case. So why would we continuously change things if it's not actually leading us to a goal? So we have to start with, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to accomplish these athletes developing skills that are going to show up in other areas of life. So we need a lot of consistency. So we may start a group of 3 or 4 athletes with just 3 or 4 exercises and have them go through 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 times, and then finish off with a game or a preferred activity, because this way we can ensure that the athletes have gotten enough volume, that's sets and repetitions, so that the skill is beginning to set in. They're getting stronger, they're getting more stable, they have greater kinesthetic awareness of the movement pattern. So this is where we're going to start seeing that athlete's skill level elevate. And if they're starting to get better at it, they are most likely going to be more engaged. Their anxiety level is going to drop a little lower, because now they understand the expectation for performance of that exercise. So in a group setting, if you're working in a classroom, this is something that you can work in every hour during the day, like a 5 or 10 minute movement break, being consistent with the activities so the athletes are familiar with them, so they begin developing the skills and get better at them, become more independent. And once they become more independent with each exercise, it's going to be a lot easier for you as a coach or as an instructor to facilitate that session, because the athletes are familiar with everything. They know the flow, they know what to do first, second, third, and fourth. So you have a really good situation in which you can work in more individually, because the other athletes understand, okay, I need to, after squats, I'm going over to overhead presses. After overhead presses, I'm going over to sandbell slams. That consistency can work wonders for you as well as a coach or instructor, because now, okay, everybody's set, everybody knows where they need to be, they know what they need to be doing. I can go around and spot check to make sure that an athlete who needs a particular modification is getting the right modification, so that if they're at the point where we can give them a slightly more complex challenge with that exercise, so we're lowering them down on a squat or we're giving them 2-pound heavier dumbbells, great, we can do that. Because the other athletes are exactly where they need to be, doing what they need to do, and following either the visual schedule, or if they need to take a break, they're taking a break. So this is a way to create an outstanding group fitness program that is not just a group fitness program in name with a bunch of random exercises, but a strategic and structured program that actually delivers on those outcomes. So I'd love to know what you think about this. I get a lot of questions about group programming. And one thing to finish off with, and this is really important, even though socialization is talked about constantly with reference to the ASD and neurodivergent population, with fitness, we have to make a decision in that session about whether this is more of a socialization group that happens to have some movement, or it is a fitness-focused curriculum that also offers socialization opportunities. And it's not to say that you can't have both, but look, the reality is, anybody who's really serious in the gym is not there to socialize as their top priority. They are in the gym to train, to get stronger, to move better, to feel better, to perform better as well. So that's another consideration, and it's no different for the autism and neurodivergent population. So is socialization important? Sure, but that is not our primary goal. And if our focus is on developing these essential movement patterns, then is socialization something we're going to build in? Sure, but is not the primary focus of the program. That's something that is really important to consider. So the question is, what are we doing? What are you doing? And what is the goal of this particular program? I would love to know your thoughts on that. Leave them in the comments below. And if there's a topic that you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, leave that in the comments below. Also, I am here to answer your questions. And of course, if you're ready to join the Movement for Movement and become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, head on over to autismfitness.com. You can download the course syllabus, learn all about our different levels of programming, our pro course, our expert course, our master level course, and of course, Autism Fitness Site Certification for your clinic, your school, your residential facility. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the Movement for Movement. Thank you very much for watching.